Hey friends, Pastor Bill Walden here, July 30th, 2024. This is the Build Up the Church ministry and a devotional word out of Romans chapter 3 today. There are some people that think because they are religious that God owes them entrance into heaven. They go to church every Sunday, they sing in the choir, they serve as a deacon, they teach the children, they do these religious things that the church has prescribed. And if you do these things, the church says, then you're going to go to heaven. And if you get baptized this way, and if you dress this way, and if you don't do these things, and you do these other things, then you're a good person and you're on your way to heaven. And that is performance-oriented religion. That is kind of saying, okay, God, I did my part, now you have to do your part. And there's a presumption there that says we presume that what we are doing is good enough. And we presume that what we are doing would qualify us to go to heaven. So the Apostle Paul talks about that in these terms. He talks about that in the terms of the works of the law, having religious law. If I do these things, God has to let me into heaven. And oftentimes we say, well, I'm not that bad of a person. I haven't killed anybody. I'm not robbing banks. And that we use those kinds of extremes examples to justify our behavior. God's standards are infinitely higher than ours. He doesn't only judge our actions and our words, but he even judges our thoughts and intentions and the desires of our heart. And so we are hopelessly and helplessly lost and indebted to God. So Paul is trying to undo the thinking of some of his readers that think, hey, listen, I go to church and I do these things and I don't do these other bad things, therefore I'm okay. And Paul presents this amazing argument, and he starts in Romans chapter 3, verse 19. Let me read it to you. Now we know that whatever the law says, or whatever your church says, it says to those who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. Because basically this, if we say I'm justified by the law, or I'm justified by my church, well, what if you miss a month? Or what if you don't feel like teaching the kids and you pretend to be sick and you don't go into the church? Or what if, your church says you're not supposed to go to movies, but you sneak around and drive to the next town over and go to a movie? In some point, whatever standard we use, we don't live up to that standard. And so, therefore, that law that we thought was so good to qualify us to go to heaven now disqualifies us because we broke it. Paul says in verse 20, therefore, by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. The law is there to restrain us. The law is not there to justify us. For instance, if the speed limit is 70 on the highway and, 29 days out of the month I drive 70, but on the 30th day I drive 85 and I get pulled over, I can't say to the officer, hey, the other days I drove 70, I obeyed the law most of the time. He would say, well, that's good, you should. It's there to restrain you from driving too fast, but today, in fact, you have failed, and so you're guilty. And so that law that's designed to keep me and other people safe has now condemned me because I didn't obey it perfectly. So Paul says, therefore, by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. But now, he says in verse 21, the righteousness of God apart from the law is revealed. How can a woman be right with God? It's apart from the law. It's apart from church rules. It's apart from being a good person. It's apart from the fact that, well, I didn't rob any banks or kill anybody. If you've thought the wrong thing, you're wrong with God. If you've lusted after your neighbor's wife or husband or new car, you're guilty before God. God's standard is perfection. We need to understand that. And he's the one that has the right to set that standard. But now the righteousness of God apart from the law, you mean I don't have to be perfect? No, you don't have to be perfect. Righteousness of God apart from the law is revealed, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ to all and on all who believe. And he goes on to say in verse 23, very well-known verse, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, but we are justified freely. When you hear the word justified in the book of Romans, it's just as if I'd never sinned. We are justified freely by his grace. And grace, when you read the word grace, think gift. Justification is a gift from God that we have to receive by faith. Being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Redemption is to buy something back, to bring something back to where it belongs. So the death of Jesus brings us back to God. So let's jettison, shall we, the idea that I can be good enough. You might be good enough for your church, and you might be good enough for you, but in your natural state, and please don't take this wrongly, I include myself in this, I'm not good enough for God. I have sinned a lot. And in truth, so have you, according to God's standards. So I don't want to try to approach God according to any set of rules that would make me a good person. Because that set of rules, as good as the set of rules may be, I have failed in some point. Therefore, I'm guilty. That good set of rules shows me how I should live, but then it condemns me when I don't live that way. What am I to do? I am to say, Lord, forgive me through Jesus Christ. So some things to think about. Thanks for watching.